Okay. Welcome. This is Jay Larson, CEO of the Idaho Technology Council, and thank you for joining us for our weekly live cast with Innovation Matters. The effects of COVID-19 can be felt throughout the world, and many Idaho companies are doing their part to assist their customers, neighbors, and friends in what's become what we call now the new normal. The thought of today is about innovation, and the thought of the week is from Martin Luther King, who said, "Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly." So you can see that is very much true with COVID-19. So today we have Kristin Ruffin, Vice President and IT Relationship Manager for Animal Health, discussion on e-commerce with AmerisourceBergen. And we also have Mike Self. He joins us with StageDotO, a unique venture capital firm that focuses on early stage companies, providing them with the growth capital, guidance, and the infrastructure they need to reach successful Series A's. But first, Celynda Roach, General Manager from Sparklight, is joining us to tell us how they are focused on providing Idahoans reliable internet service to stay connected to family, work, school, and information during this time. Celynda, I know that Sparklight has recently changed their name, but from Cable One. Tell us a little bit about why that took place and how things are going.
Well, Cable One has been around for a long time, and originally it was known as Post Times Newsweek Cable. And then in '86, it changed to Cable One. And as our technology has changed, we really felt it was important to reflect what we do. And although we do provide cable services, it's the internet that is probably our main product, that and fiber. We also do offer phone services, and we also do business as well. But we did not think that Cable One truly reflected who we were. And so we are now Sparklight, but how do I want to say this? We are Cable One, now doing business as Sparklight. We're still owned by the same people. We went public in 2015, and we changed our name last July 1st. So we will be celebrating our first anniversary with our new name.
Congratulations on that. That's and I know you've been a very strong internet provider, and obviously cable provider in the Boise Valley and Idaho. What are your areas that you cover in Idaho?
Besides Boise and the surrounding area, we have Nampa and Western Idaho, going all the way up to McCall. We have Lewiston, Twin Falls, Pocatello, and Idaho Falls. And then a lot of the other towns like Jerome, Melba, all these other little towns that surround the areas, Blackfoot. And we've been here since there has been a cable or an internet, let's say, there has been a cable company in Idaho since 1978. But the changeover to internet really started in the mid 90s. And so that actually has become our main product.
I would imagine. So that has probably been the biggest shifts that's taken place since COVID-19, right? Because now, as opposed to people doing their work and working on Zoom and all the other type of mediums that we utilize, we usually used to do this from work. Now we're doing it from homes. How's that impacted Sparklight's business?
It's increased our activity tremendously. There's been a small leveling off, but I would say the first month, we were doing 100 installs a day. And it's everybody's dream, but it's under the worst of circumstances because of the reason. But we probably during the first month, once Governor Little announced that we were closing down, it just really took off. And
what would be the normal installations during a normal time versus
we might do 30 a day normally, so we increased
threefold at least.
Yeah, threefold.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun because I think that you can see how the internet is just is good. It's the delivery system we have. Like, if we would have talked about doing a Zoom call, 10, 15 years ago, the infrastructure wasn't there, technology wasn't there. Now we're able to do all these things, and it's changing the way we do business. And COVID-19 has changed this new normal to the point where I think like a Zoom call like we're on right now will be commonplace for the way we do business now, whether I want to, like when I'm going to reach out to Mike Self, who's down in Arizona, or whether I'm reaching across the city to you or Kristin Ruffin over off of Vista. This is great, isn't it?
Well, it is. It's great on so many levels that at least we can provide this kind of service to people, and not just us, other cable provider or internet providers as well. But I think until we have a vaccine or a treatment for COVID, I think this is the new norm. And I think I'm thinking especially for schools. Think about the situation that the state of Idaho has been in with the closing of schools and trying to keep kids safe. And so not only for business people, but for kids, I think when we go back to school in September, we're going to see a very different school year than we've ever seen before. And it's going to be mixed use.
Yeah, the virtual versus the FaceTime with the teacher. And that means that more people are going to be using your services, right? So
Absolutely.
So how reliable? Talk about how, one of the biggest things I think that takes place is the reliability of the service.
I'm pretty proud of that. I'll tell you, over the last 5 years, Sparklight has invested over $600 million. And just in Idaho, we have invested over $250 million. And this year alone, we're going to probably double what we did last year, just for the city of Boise. In 1 year from 18 to 19, we did 28 million, and I think we're going to see a doubling of that.
Wow.
And that's to make sure that our network is robust and that we have redundancy. The Boise system actually is a master head end for the entire company. And so our second location is actually in Joplin, Missouri. And we did that so that we could provide redundancy. And we started that project and actually completed it in 2016 at the same time that we launched 1 gig service to residential customers.
Wow. So tell us, what does it mean to be a master head end?
It means that video, phone, and internet services are all concentrated in that head end. Think about the heart and the pumping of blood. Well, we're pumping out RF so that our customers can receive whatever product they are getting with the most robust capacity possible.
You took me on a brief tour of your facilities, which have been dramatically upgraded over the last couple of years, right? I was amazed at the facilities that you have that are outside in the back with all of and that is fantastic, because in order for us to be able to have this knowledge economy in the state of Idaho, we need to have really reliable, fast internet speeds. And that's what you provide, right?
That's what we try to do each and every day. As I was mentioning just before we started streaming, we've had actually more fiber cuts than we've had for some time, which is surprising. I'm assuming some of those are based on other people trying to get more fiber in the ground or above ground to do their business. And unfortunately, sometimes they make mistakes and they cut our services. But with that said, because of the redundancy, we may have reduced services for a small period of time, but hopefully most of the time, it's a very short period of time, and we're able to make repairs very quickly.
That's good. That's good that you have. I was going to ask you a quick question on this. And this is the part that kind of comes out where there was a report that was about maybe 5 years ago that talked about some of the states that had the biggest problems with having internet in their state.
Are you talking about the state of the internet from Akamai in 2017?
That's exactly the report. Thank you very much for.
So yes, That has been a pain in my neck for years. Number one, that was old data, which of course, I mean, you can't project the future, but we had just launched 1 gig, and it was actually based on peer-to-peer. It was not based on residential. Now, obviously, peer-to-peer is important because that's the business part of being able to provide internet. But since that time, Idaho and specifically Sparklight has worked very hard to improve that. And of course, then Akamai actually got a call from several countries because they not only reported on states, but they reported on countries. And they no longer put that report out. But for a lot of legislators and a lot of people, it's like, oh, Idaho is dead last in being able to provide internet services with good speeds and reliability. And so any opportunity I have to share that information that is not true and it wasn't based on residential, it's a good thing.
And it's one that we actually have a lot faster speeds. We're not, and also the other part of that I thought was very interesting, because when I read the report, the states that were like small states, like let's say Connecticut, really had high ratings on it, Rhode Island, but the ones that had the biggest problems were the areas that had like the biggest states. I mean, like you take Idaho and you flatten it out and you take all the mountains and the valleys and everything like that, and we're bigger than Texas. We're the biggest in the lower 48.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy to be able to have all these comparisons where you don't have apples for apples.
Well,
right?
Geography does make a big difference too. You think about the East Coast. I mean, I'm from Indiana, and Indiana is a lot more crowded than Idaho is if you were to travel. There are not long spaces where you're just seeing beautiful scenery. There are little towns pretty much every 10 miles because at the turn of the previous century, when things were developing, you could go to town in about 4 hours. And so 10 miles was that distance you could make in a horse and buggy. And that's just the difference in technology and how things have changed.
They have, and no respect would I ever think that we'd ever want to make an excuse for that, because I know you never would, and that that we are delivering excellent service like what you're delivering through Sparklight, and we have great bandwidth when it comes to what customers can get in our state. Maybe more challenged. I know the governor has a broadband task force.
Yes.
And do you know anything about that? Can you talk about that?
Actually, I do. We have been on that board trying to come up with solutions to provide services to underserved and unserved areas throughout Idaho. We believe there is a fixed wireless solution that's going to be part of the answer in providing services outside of the populated areas. And we've been actually beta testing that technology. We also know that we probably need to partner with not only the state, but probably the government. And that's a position that is, as a private company, you always kind of want to do it yourself, but there's been monies made available, and the Broadband Task Force actually has applied for some of that money. They anticipate coming up with a plan, hopefully within the next month or so, on how to deploy that to different providers so that we can reach out to other communities. So in partnership with the state and potentially the federal government, we may, not necessarily Boise, but some of the other Sparklight systems and other providers within Idaho hope to make use of that to be of service.
Well, this will be, I know this is going to continue to unroll. I would love to be able to have you back on to talk about this in the future, what takes place, Celynda, if that'd be fine. And then maybe we can roll into some other areas and bring another discussion around 5G and some other deployment that might be taking place on that fixed wireless side. So
be happy to do it.
That'd be great. And we appreciate all the support you've had, that we've had with, and the relationship as a partnership with the Idaho Technology Council. Thanks, Celynda.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thank you, Celynda. Roach. We now will move over to Kristin Ruffin with AmerisourceBergen. And I want to make sure, Kristen, should we call this AmerisourceBergen, or should I say MWI Animal Health?
I think for this audience, it's probably useful to use MWI Animal Health, but I can explain that a little bit as well, given that we were acquired by AmerisourceBergen, and that'll be part of my comments as well.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think this is fantastic, because MWI Animal Health was a company that, as I understand it, was started by a veterinarian over in Nampa. It was merged together with AgriBeef and kind of started that way, and then it spun out as a separate company and became MWI, and then was acquired for several billion dollars by AmerisourceBergen. And according to Jim Cleary, who was your CEO at the time and then now is the CFO of AmerisourceBergen, said that one of the three main pillars of AmerisourceBergen was animal health, and that is why they purchased MWI Animal Health. Tell us more.
Yep, and that history lesson was very good, Jay. Good job. It was, MWI was started in Nampa by, MWI stands for, it was Doc Ickes, probably many on the phone might know him, and then kind of moved through that history. And so what we do is we are an animal health distribution and services provider for the animal health industry. That includes veterinarians, it includes producers and dairies, it includes poultry and swine producers, ag retail, manufacturers, and we've now started, in these kind of latest year, 2 years, starting to move into the retail and online space as well. And really it is both products based and services based. So I can talk a little bit about the services. Products, that's fairly straightforward. Any of the products that you buy at your veterinary clinic or you're administering to the animals for healthcare, we have a full line set of products. The services really are a little bit different. So we have a company called Micro Technologies down in Amarillo, Texas, and they really provide software and kind of technology components to really drive protein production in the cattle industry. So they have they have micro weigh stations, which are really measuring feed additives to really drive optimal protein production as cattle move through feed yards. There's water quality services that we provide to all of the producers, as well as biosecure delivery when that's necessary for poultry and swine. So a large set of services from that aspect. And then really from a companion animal standpoint, we're really starting to move into really services, technology services that really provide the veterinarian with ways to increase their profitability. So one of the, I'll give more detail on it, but a recent acquisition was Allied DVM, which is really a client engagement platform for the veterinarians that really focus on client retention and client compliance. In the veterinary industry, that's really a kind of a problem, as really making sure that everyone is giving every dose of whatever flea tick and heartworm meds you are giving your pet, and it's kind of a problem because typically you're in the vet's office and you get your first dose, but then it's the follow-up after that often people either forget or they don't continue to do it, and it's less, there's less focus on wellness for your pets, although that's starting to shift with millennials. They do tend to be more focused on pets. So that kind of gives you a background of what we do. And we are, a key driver from, hey, you're on mute, Jake.
I better mute this, but I wanted to show you at this point, this is what's going on. I know I haven't introduced, and this is not something you're supposed to do on, these type of calls, but since we're talking about animals and our pets, I'm going to introduce you to Bella. Bella, say hello to everyone. Okay.
Hello, Bella.
And I think this is a big thing because this is part of what you're talking about, how important the health of your companion animals are. I mean, it's really becoming a big part of our economy, hasn't it?
Yep, that's exactly right. And as we think about the impact from a COVID standpoint, actually, you can't, if you've seen headlines, you can't adopt pets right now because there's just not any pets to adopt because everyone has gone out and gotten a pet, given that they're isolated and in quarantine. So it's I would say generally the stat off the top of my head, if I remember right, the average household has 3 companion pets.
Is that
In
right?
today's environment, yeah.
I know. The person who runs all of the stuff for the our computing alliance has like 2 cats always running around behind. But and I know that it's kind of crazy. But tell me something. If you can sit there right now, what has happened with since COVID-19? Has MWI's business gone up significantly because of this?
So I would say the first week we saw a significant increase, and then with the stay-at-home orders and veterinarians in some cases actually, testing positive for COVID, we saw a couple, April was really a tough month in the companion animal space. So we saw closures of some veterinary clinics just because, they had to close and disinfect and reopen. And you probably all, if you've taken your pets to the vet, have experienced they're doing curbside pickup and different things. So April was tough. And now in May, we're starting to see that level off from a companion animal standpoint. I'll talk about production in a minute, but what we're finding is that there's been a big movement to telehealth, retail, online pharmacy for product-based stuff that used to generally people would go into the vet and get. So they're able to get those prescription drugs or whatever through the online retail, more access. That's been opening up kind of gradually, but with COVID-19, that's sort of exploded to some extent.
And telemedicine, obviously, as we've had St. Luke's and other folks on, has just really exploded, and that's happening on the
similar,
health side,
yep,
a
and
similar thing on
yep,
the
in
animal
the
health side.
companion animal side.
Wow.
So we just recently went in, we do commercial partnerships with software solutions in the companion animal space, and we just recently announced one in the telehealth area, as well as sort of the online or curbside check-in capabilities, so that as vets are moving to that curbside check-in. And generally they were, a lot of executive orders that we saw as we were going through the COVID, before we started to open up, we had to, in some cases, states wouldn't allow PPE product to be sold to vets unless that they certified it was for an emergency surgery.
Wow.
From a pet standpoint. So we've had to definitely react and change some things in order to support that. But I would say now we're starting to see, from a vet standpoint, there's fewer people walking in the door, but they're focusing on services, which is a higher dollar value for them. So that shift is noticeable, and we're starting to see more business pick up on the companion animal space. The production animals kind of opposite. So looks like you have a question before I go on.
Yeah, well, the production animal, I was going to tell us a little bit about when you say production animal, that's cattle in that area? And
well, yep, it's actually across the board. So it's going to be cattle, dairy, swine, and poultry. All are fairly significantly impacted. And obviously that impact, we saw less impact in April. And then as the packers started to close down, again, you probably noticed that in the news, that really has impacted the ability to get, the supply chain for protein across the board in all cases. And each one of those areas sort of have the ability to adjust to that impact differently. So you think about poultry, they can react the easiest because they just break their eggs. Swine, they don't really have a good way to react. And so they've been fairly significantly impacted. And then cattle has definitely been impacted. But the key thing for us as we think about where we think our production animal business will go is the demand is still there. It really is how our business will pick up there will be dependent on the capacity of those packers. So if you think about those packers having to now, they were side by side going through the lines, they're now going to have to social distance and put space between them. So instead of being at 100% capacity, they may be at 70 or 80% capacity. So less, again, still having, the demands there. It's the ability to get those, that protein through the packers really is the challenge, and really understanding how quickly will people go back to restaurants. If you think about production, certainly grocery retail has increased, but really the big ticket items, steaks, et cetera, that was really, the restaurant industry, the fast food type industry, a significant amount of protein was going to those, into that area. And that's just really fallen off with the stay-at-home orders and, less people going out. So it'll be, we're watching it very closely to see how quickly people start to feel comfortable to go back into a restaurant and order those higher end beef and
that's
protein.
what you would find a lot of that now, where people wouldn't go there, but that's the reason that Albertsons has been seeing the significant growth, right? Because the people are now going to those places or ordering food or other type of things. Are you, so your responsibility at MWI Animal Health is in the technology to make sure that, the online purchases, all of the type of things that are taking place. If you take a look at that, what do you see as the biggest shifts that are going to be taking place to be able to continue? Because the other part of this is that, as I understand it, MWI has, through AmerisourceBergen, has made about three acquisitions of other companies, maybe more, in the animal health space, and they're all staying through your wheelhouse within MWI Animal Health, right?
Yep, so they're still part of that. We do run some of the companies as separate entities, but we have a lot of integration points with them. So in general, I would say we did see a significant uptick in e-commerce sales as the transition happened. But we've really had our sales force has really been creative, and really the inside sales team has continued to, we took them remote very quickly, and they have strong relationships with their customers. And so I think that they've really been reaching out and making sure, customers are doing well and how can they help them. So but I would say, we saw probably a spike up as far as a 10% increase in some of our online sales. But, our general revenue has been down the last 2 months, and we're just seeing it start to pick up. So that'll be interesting to see as we continue. But it really then gets back to how are we with some of these other acquisitions like Ally DVM that's focused on the veterinary side of things. How do we support that? How do we support home delivery and really make that an integrated, kind of an integrated process for the veterinarian to be able to provide those services to his, customers and his clients. So we've got, we just recently sort of went through a strategy update this past year or so, and we've got several imperatives that we're working on, much of which includes technology-based items to provide more services. The telehealth was a good example. As I said, home delivery, we have some partnerships there, but we're really looking at what do we need to do there. Because I do think, we believe that like many other industries, we're seeing happen will, the norm will shift to some of these things, and there'll be more telehealth and less visits to the veterinary clinic.
Yeah, the norm's going to be different, right? Because it's going to be more using the virtual telehealth. Kristen, this has been, I think that MWI Animal Health has been one of the most amazing success stories in our valley over the last 15, 20 years. And it's an amazing company. And we got to tell you, thank you for all the work that's taking place there. And I know I'm speaking this because you grew up, I know it's not Kimberly, but you grew outside of Kimberly, right?
Yeah, actually in Castle Forward, which is outside of Twin Falls, that
outside
area.
Of Twin Falls in that area. And a U of I grad and all those type of things. We really appreciate all the things that you've done and the energy and how you're focused on being able to make sure that MWI Health is one of the premier companies, not only in our state, but in the world. So thank you for all the work you do. So
yeah, thank you, Jay.
We'll have it again. We'll have another MWI update sometime in the future, especially when we start talking more about companion animals and those type of things, which I'm sure that is going to be a big part, a big expansion of your business. So thanks so much, Kristen.
Sure, thanks.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll now transition to our last segment, and this is Mike Self, who is the one of the founders of StageDotO, which Mike, welcome to Innovation Matters.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having me.
And I know this is great because I think the last time I saw you, early this year, you opened up your new offices at 110 East Main Street, right?
We did, yeah. We, part of our strategy with Boise, Idaho is that we really wanted to, we moved our corporate headquarters there, and we really wanted to have a physical presence, a meeting place. So for us, it's more than just an office, but we really wanted to help contribute to the startup ecosystem. So the companies that we fund start out right there, and kind of the big Victorian rooms, or I guess big Georgian rooms, and the Georgian house there at 110 Main is working out to be socially distant enough as well. So we're compliant in that way as well. So we're excited to be there.
Well, talk to us a little bit about what the StageDotO strategy is. Talk about that and what you see happening in Idaho.
Yeah. So the strategy around StageDotO is we really want to solve the problem of getting entrepreneurs from ideation, commercialization to funded through a Series A investment. And these days that Series A investment has moved farther out in a company's life cycle. So it's become a bigger problem for entrepreneurs. And typically, 20 or 25 years ago, that's where venture capitalists were living, where StageDotO is today. And that's giving the support to an entrepreneur to really give them the best chance possible to succeed. So we like to call it that we give our entrepreneurs a big giant bear hug and give them all the as much support as we can to increase their probability to get the liquidity they need to build a successful company. So that's our strategy. Our second fund, we had been visiting Idaho for for a good 12 months, and as I like to say, we're still waiting to have a bad meeting in Idaho. The real difference maker is it's not the cost of living, it's not the beautiful scenery or the way of life. It's really the people. And so much like how we choose our companies, people matter first. It certainly is true. It was true with our reason to come to Boise, Idaho.
Well, it's that. This is a great opportunity for us because one of our major objectives through the Idaho Technology Council is to grow access to capital. And as you look at this, you have a choice. You had a chance, or I should say, you've evaluated a lot of different areas. You could go a lot of different choices as far as where you can locate. I know we're talking about people, but talk about some of those other maybe intangibles that you saw about the Boise area or the Idaho marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had a general theme, which, Jay, we talked a lot about, and really with other folks in the ecosystem in Boise, Idaho, pre-COVID-19. And, we really think that what's happened has just accelerated that trend. And that's distributed workforces with companies. And that we just felt with the talent set that was in Idaho and in the Treasure Valley, it was going to be, the region was going to be a big beneficiary over the next 10 to 20 years. And quite frankly, we couldn't believe that the lack of presence as far as, maybe some other institutional capital in the region. So we just viewed it as really the best opportunity set. Our first fund was geographically agnostic. We had invested from Seattle all the way to London, which, the airlines liked. We didn't as, quite as much. And so there's that trend of the ability to be able to start companies out of the major tech hubs, especially in the Western region of the United States, we think is going to accelerate. That was the reason why we first started looking at Boise, Idaho. and we felt like it had all the ingredients to be in Austin, Texas, or a Salt Lake City, and it was just a matter of time. And you know, we felt like there was some first mover advantage with that as well, which we're feeling. And so it's great to be a part of an ecosystem where everyone has their oars in the water pointed in the same direction. And so there's just there's a ton of energy. I would tell you that I think that a year ago, the environment has proved, and we thought it was great then, has improved, you know, fivefold. And we think that energy is just going to continue and continue and continue. And, you know, we've been involved in kind of some other ecosystems and invested in them as they've grown. And, you know, we think Boise, Idaho is about as good of an opportunity as you can find over the next 10 to 20 years.
You know, it's interesting, Mike, when you take a look at what happened when the dot-com bust took place, you know, and it looked like everything needed to go through Silicon Valley. We've had several of the successful companies over the last 10 years that to 10 to 20 have said, you need to move out of Boise. You can't be here. We've had, because you can't, you know, we don't have a lot of what they said, the right stuff, you know, because you need to go to these areas, and also because they wanted to be closer to some of the investment opportunities. So they wanted people to encourage them to move. But it's kind of flipping around a lot more now, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people are looking outside. A lot of capital is looking outside of how can they invest money in other markets outside of traditional areas, like Silicon Valley. How can they go outside of a market like that? So how much is that going to take place in the next 18 months, do you think, 2 years?
Oh, I mean, we think it's probably the biggest trend in investing. You know, to be quite frank, I mean, I think one of the big challenges for Series A, Series B investors is, you know, as the deal flow gets distributed to the Boise, Idahos of the world, is, you know, how do you get your meat hooks into all that deal flow? And so I think that the next 18 months is just the beginning of that trend, quite frankly. You know, I think that there's some bigger things that regions like Boise need to think about. And one of those is to make sure that the company's actually founded there and founded in Boise, Idaho. And because workforces are going to get distributed in ways that we haven't seen before. So there's a much bigger difference, I think, for the community in the region if the company's founded in Boise, Idaho, and you have some engineering talent that lives in Seattle or San Francisco or Los Angeles or other tech hubs, versus, you know, the other way around. And maybe the number of employees may actually be the same in the region. But I think from a tax basis and longevity perspective, it's important for us right now in Boise to say, we are going to build our own company. It's not a matter of numbers of jobs that'll be on a governor's report, you know, around how many tech jobs are in the region, how many tech jobs with their headquarters there. And I think that will be a big difference and a big differentiator. And look, we just think Boise's set up right, and we think that the time is right. So you said next 18 months, I would stretch that over the next 10 years. I think that how companies are built will be markedly different.
Yeah, that distributed model you were just talking about, it will change, and the way that the distributed workforce is going to even be more remote. I think COVID-19 is showing us that, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I think that it's accelerating the trends, and just in general, I think COVID-19 has done that, where you have these massive trends that we're probably bumping along that you could look at over the next 5 to 10 years and say, wow, distributed workforces and different things, like, yeah, we could see how that's slowly changing. And this was just a litmus test for everybody to see what trends really work and which ones, you know, don't. This was a nice 8-week dress rehearsal for what the next 10 years is going to look like. And so I would tell you, you know, you can have theories, like we had our theory around what we thought distributed models would look like. It certainly is empowering to have those be proven out, you know, over a short period of time. So I think for us, it's, you know, we have our sleeves rolled up and we're like, okay, well, what are we going to do with this opportunity? So we're really excited.
Well, I'm excited to have you back. I know that as we continue to come out of COVID-19 and we kind of come into the new normal, I would encourage anyone that when they can to be able to go to 110 Main and look at what you're building here in Idaho, because the companies that you're investing in, the way that you're helping them become move to the next level and continue to iterate is fantastic, Mike. It's and we really appreciate the focus you brought and with your team. Also, I want to make sure I mention this. On I think it's going to be around June 10th. We're going to have Capital Connect and the Idaho Deal Flow Report with Blake Hansen with Alturas Capital, and also Allison Johnson with Holland and Hart as our co-chairs of that. And you're going to be our keynote at that. So a little precursor of stuff you've been talking about today are going to be people can tune into that on the 10th of, I think the 10th of June, but we'll lock in that date really soon. So any other highlights you'd like to have? But make sure people show these tidbits of things, because they've already seen how wise of a guy you are right now. Anything else?
No, I would tell you that we've been really impressed with that. We're invested in 4 companies right now in Boise, and we thought we'd be a little farther along, but I think everybody did. That was kind of the downside of what's happened over the last 12 weeks. But just couldn't be prouder of our entrepreneurs and the way that they responded to the environment. For most of them, it's been opportunity for sure. I mean, everything's that we invest in is tech based, and so technology is certainly solving some of those problems. But just as we talked about, it starts with the people, and the Idaho work ethic, stick-to-itiveness was just extremely evident over the last 2 to 3 months with the entrepreneurs we're invested in now. And so I can tell you that each of those 4 companies are in a much better spot than they were 12 weeks ago. And so we try and take 12-week snippets in general on our companies, and some have really benefited from the difficult environment and seen the opportunity in that, and will be accelerated. And I think people in the area will hear more about that, over the next couple months. So,
well, Mike, we're looking forward to that, and I do know the part that's going on is that what I think is really interesting is that it's just kind of like almost like you press a pause button, right? Because you've had this time. Because I was just so what the progress that StageDotO was making and the progress that you were making on investing in companies and finding those companies that are going to help accelerate. It was amazing. I'm excited to be able to see how you, as you continue to press down on that accelerator here in the next several months to years. So thanks for all you're doing to help change the landscape of innovation in Idaho with respect to access to capital and developing talent. So we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome to the region. We couldn't be happier to be there on many reasons. And there's so many people have asked us why Boise, Idaho. And I'm like, well, how long do you want to talk about this? But the work that Gordon Jones is doing at Boise State, the deal flow report, all those little things that collectively may not seem, individually may not seem that much, collectively together just gives some really great soil here to grow some amazing companies. So just really appreciate the warm welcome, starting with the Idaho Technology Council and everything else. You guys have worked so hard. So we really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Mike. And make sure everybody puts on their calendar June 10th. Look at that date. We're just firming it up a lot right now to be able to have Capital Connect and the Idaho Deal Flow Report on that date. It's going to be wonderful. And Mike, thanks for being our keynote on that talk. And we'll look forward to hearing from you more. And then we'll have you periodically, as we have Innovation Matters in the future, we'll have you again to be able to give some capital updates. Does that sound good?
Sounds great, Jay. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you all. And we hope that you'll keep following us on YouTube and continue to join us for our weekly live cast. Next week's topics are going to be Innovation Matters, If You Protect It. And it's going to be with Brad Frazier about intellectual property and internet law partner. He's at Holly Troxel. And also Jim Gassaway, the CIO with Count, where we'll talk about online buying behavior shifts, protecting online purchases and fraud, and which continues to increase, especially during these times. Remember, the thought of the week has been whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. So let's take care of each other. We also want you to know that during these times, let's make sure we look for ways to help and lift other people. And this is Jay Larson with the Idaho Technology Council. Keep you connected with industry and government because in Idaho, innovation matters. Thanks and have a great day.